And a very good day to you at one past the hour, wherever you are on planet Earth. That little blue bulb hanging in the blackness, we can see from the Apollo 8 photograph from 1968. However, here we are in 2026, and that little blue bulb is glowing with activity, a lot of naval activity. Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang joins me as my colleague and co host. Gordon is not traveling for the moment. He's in Europe, not moving for the moment. We also are joined by Captain Fennell, Jim Fennell, United States Navy retired and intelligence officer, helping us understand East Asia in its permutations. However, we're asking the captain to begin the day, our day, with a celebration of the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Navy. Captain, my admiration for the Navy is endless because we are a two-ocean continent. And without the Navy, we are vulnerable to all kinds of bad acting. With the Navy, we're invulnerable, and certainly that has been the case for 250 years. Your measure right now of the U.S. Navy, is it adequate for the Atlantic and Pacific assignments and also into the Indian Ocean? Good evening to you.
Well, good evening, John. To answer your question point blank, no. I don't think that we're ready for the challenges that we have facing us today, especially given the rise of the People's Republic of China's Navy over the last quarter century. We have reduced the size of our Navy in that time frame from 600 ships in 1986 to today having less than 300. So we are on a trajectory of, it's been decline, interrupted by President Trump's first administration, and now again he's put some energy back into it in terms of the announcement of the Golden Fleet this year at the ceremony of our birthday on 13 October of 2025. But looking back at our history, we have gone through this cycle repeatedly, even with our founding.
We'll begin then our conversation. I'm going to record this. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. I wanted to give you some prep on the captain's sweeping history of the U.S. Navy because we're going to focus. The focus is going to be two fleets, one gathered off Venezuela, one gathered off Iran. They are sometimes called Armada. That's a colorful word that the president chooses. They are most particularly a very large strike force, around a carrier battle group or more, with submarines and attendant vessels for landing and for extracting. However, why they're there is geopolitical. And the question is how long they're going to stay, what the capabilities are, what this means about the present state of the world. The U.S. can project power off of the coast of South America and project power off the coast of Eurasia. However, so gentlemen, I will begin immediately. 5. We're recording. This will be 8 to 9 minutes for tonight. Yes, of course, we're going to celebrate the Navy, but there's bad acting out there. We'll get to it right away. 5. Thank you. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. I welcome my colleague and friend, Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang, and our colleague and guide on the U.S. Navy at its 250th birthday, Captain Jim Fennell, United States Navy retired and intelligence officer, many years in East Asia, where the front line is drawn along the first island chain. At the moment, however, the U.S. Navy and its authority is projected mightily off the coast of South America, in particular off the coast of Venezuela, but stretching from Venezuela to Puerto Rico and beyond. In addition, the U.S. Navy, with a carrier battle strike group, at least one, is off the coast of Eurasia, specifically looking at Iran and the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. What these two amazing deployments represent is the authority of the United States and its allies dealing with rogue states or failed states, one, Venezuela, and two, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Captain, I begin with the idea that the U.S. Navy is not there to show off its sparkling details. It's there to project power, but how so? What does power look like in the 21st century with the Navy and facing the Islamic Republic of Iran? Good evening to you, Captain.
Good evening, John and Gordon. Well, we do have the Lincoln Carrier Strike Group off of Iran, as you noted, a number of warships that support the carrier's operations, which is to send aircraft ashore or against other navies, in this case, Iran, to deal with the situation there. It was also announced, I think, in the last few days that out of the East Coast, the USS G.W. Bush, George Walker Bush, is also departing and possibly could be heading to the region as well. These platforms are the centerpiece, one element of the centerpiece of the Navy's power. Another, obviously, would be our undersea domain and ability of our ballistic missile submarines to provide nuclear deterrent against major powers like China or Russia in that case. So we have a Navy that's still quite large and still very, very powerful. But as we go along this last quarter century, and as we look to the next quarter century, we can see that we've kind of been in a lull state in terms of the appreciation of naval power, that George Washington understood 250 years ago, which was that without naval power, we cannot do anything definitive. And with it, we can do some really good things. And so in this case, we have a Navy that's grown in China we will not be able to do what we've done in Venezuela or are doing now in Iran, which is to go basically pull off of somebody's coast and sit there and then decide at our time in choosing when we want to strike. If we get in a fight with the Chinese, we will not have that luxury. And it'll be much more akin to what we saw in 1941 with the Imperial Japanese Navy.
Gordon, you have a question for the captain.
I remember seeing that Iran has announced naval exercises with China and Russia off its coast. That would see if that goes forward, that would seem to mean that there'd be a lot of ships in a very close proximity to each other. What do you think about this?
Well, this announcement is not, it's not unprecedented. The Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians have exercised in the Gulf of Oman in previous years and even in the Persian Gulf. They've just done similar exercises down off the coast of South Africa for the second or third or fourth year in a row. So this is part of this kind of BRICS initiative in terms of military naval activity. But in this case, yes, there's going to be a lot of traffic in addition to commercial traffic that is the lifeline of Europe in terms of their energy supplies and in terms of the global trade that goes through the Red Sea and up into the Mediterranean. So there's going to be a lot of traffic there. I've already seen there's been warnings about American naval ships to stay well off the coast of Iran, outside of range of anti-ship cruise missile batteries or any other kind of ordnance that could be fired from Iran. So we're not unawares of the traffic and the capabilities of these platforms, but it is something to watch and to see what they're doing and to see how close they'll try to get to the American Naval Carrier Strike Group to collect intelligence or to test our rules of engagement and for indications and warning.
Captain, the missile that you fear is the killer, the one that is called the carrier killer. The Chinese have developed it. Is there any reason to believe that that missile is in Iran or in Venezuela?
We don't know that. We haven't seen any definitive reporting on that. But I think in the case of Venezuela, we can say we didn't see anything unleashed in that operation. So it's probably unlikely that it's in Venezuela at this time. But we cannot say for certainty that there's not something similar in the Iranian place, in Iran. We have to remember also that anti-carrier and anti-ship ballistic missiles have been used by the Houthi rebels in Yemen and fired into and at American naval vessels in these waters of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Oman. So we've already faced this to a degree with a lesser capable missile. But this idea of sending a ballistic missile or a hypersonic missile at our ships is definitely something that may be in the Iranians' kit bag. And Beijing has been flying aircraft into Iran. We've seen that. There's a lot of reporting about that.
Gordon, you have a question.
about a week ago, the Iranians sent a drone close to the Abraham Lincoln, and they shot it down because it posed a threat to the carrier strike group. What do you think the Iranians were doing? Were they trying to test our defenses, or were there something else going on?
I think it's probably a combination of intelligence and surveillance, also testing our defensive structure. You know, on our carrier strike forces, we have a thing that's called the vital area. And so if you're the commander of a carrier strike group, there's a distance away from the carrier. There's many distances. There's layered concentric circles for identification and then monitoring, and then the vital area, which is if you come inside that vital area, you're going to be dead unless you're identified as a friend and not an adversary. So they were probably testing that as well. I don't think they were trying to attack us. If they were, they met their fate that way.
Right now, your opinion of these two theaters, Venezuela and Iran, which is more threatening to the U.S. Navy's capabilities right now?
Definitely Iran. The Iranian capacity and their number of anti-ship ballistic or cruise missile batteries that they have, and the potential for ballistic missiles that they may have indigenously produced or have received from China or Russia, are something that we have to be very careful of. And the fact that the proximity of these choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz, like the Bab el-Mandeb that goes into the Red Sea near Djibouti and that Horn of Africa area. So lots of choke points where you can be in a narrower area where you can be vulnerable as we come in and out of the theater from the East Coast, less so from the West Coast, from California, where you can go through the Indian Ocean and not have to worry about being shot by coastal defenses. But if you're coming, like the Bush is coming from the East Coast, and you have to go through the Mediterranean and down through the Suez, you're going to be on high alert that entire transit.
Captain James Fennell, United States Navy, retired at the 250th anniversary of the United States Navy, commenting on the present condition of the Navy off two hostile coasts. Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Next time we can talk about letters of marque. I read up on it last night.
Oh, wonderful. I saw that detail, but I thought we'd get right to the threat analysis this morning, because the Iranians have an unknown capability. Unknown.
Yeah, you can't discount it.
No, especially because there have been, I'm told, aircraft going back and forth between Beijing and Tehran for some time now.
Yes, that's definitely true.
And we don't know what's in those aircraft, nor do we know what the Russians regard as success in Iran. As it used to be said, we've got a combat situation where the enemy only has to get lucky once.
And we can't afford to lose any more carriers.
Or Arleigh Burkes, or anything. You know, it will be celebrated. So they've got to be perfect. Thank you, Jim, and happy birthday.
Thanks. All the best, Gordon.
Yeah, you too, Jim.
Bye-bye.
And I press a button and go immediately to the South Pacific, I believe. I'm in Indonesia with Charles Ortel. Charles, a very good day to you.
I'm actually in Malaysia.
Ah, you're in Malaysia. I couldn't tell.
One too many Charleses at this moment.
From the background. And we're starting with you because of the trade matters that are heaping up around us. But before we do the recording, and you know, this is the making of the John Batchelor Show, Charles. We're on live now around the world, but we're about to record for the show. Gordon, okay. I'm struggling with your mic. I lost the first words of each time you commented. Now, it's something different from when we talked last.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you fine, but there's something that goes disruptive when you first start talking. I miss the first few words. Is it a loose connection? What does it look like that you're pressing?
How about now? Do you lose the first word?
Well, you're on computer mic. You're not on your headset mic.
Right.
That's been the difficulty. Now you're off camera.
I'm calling you back, Jason. I'm just going on here.
Excuse me. I mean, Charles, it's fine. we're on air now. This is the way we make carrot soup. Is the metaphor I prefer. Gordon, let me hear the mic now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah, now
7,
you're on.
8, 9, 10.
All right, Charles, I turn to you for a little gamesmanship. At the bottom of your screen, you see a number of icons, and one looks like a gear. Do you see that one?
Yep.
Will you press on that, please? Now you'll see a list of settings, and the one I want you to click on says audio. Do you see that?
Yep.
All right. Now there are 3 things to check off: echo cancellation and reduce mic background. Check off that.
That's done.
And automatically adjust mic volume at the bottom is already checked. Let me make
Correct.
sure. We count to 10 for me, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Excellent. You can now return to the main screen by punching out of that little X in the upper right, and you'll be back to wherever you belong. Okay, you see us well? You hear me well?
I do. Do you want me to turn the light down behind me, or
No, you're fine.
Okay.
It's not how we do it, Charles. It's that we do it at all. You see, Charles?
I got it.
That's my philosophy of pushing buttons. We're 20th century men lost in the 21st.
I'm back in the 17th century.
Yes, you are. Gordon, let me hear you count to 10, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You're now perfect, Gordon. Perfect sound. We will begin immediately. I'm pulling up everything here. And I'm beginning to get a little of the magisterial arrogance of Alfred Hitchcock ordering people around on the set. Hitchcock was famous for being quoted saying, "Actors are cattle," and everybody thought that was funny. I have a photograph of Alfred Hitchcock sitting next to Dorothy Lamour at the Stork Club in New York in 1950. Is that amazing? I mean, just amazing. Dorothy Lamour, she was a comedian, I understand, but wow, what a knockout. I recommend everybody look up the Stork Club, and you'll see all the famous characters all gathered together in a little room in New York smoking. All right, Charles.
What were you doing in the Stork Club in 1950?
I got lost in a picture gallery, and it popped up, and I saw Orson Welles gesturing loudly at a crowded table. You could almost hear him in the black and white photograph. Later on, they moved a CBS camera into the Stork Club and would broadcast every week the famous people that came by. But I'm told the camera wrecked it because everybody then went to their Hollywood face. And and weren't acting real. All right. 5. Thank you, gentlemen. 5. Oh, we're exploring the term national team. Great stuff, Gordon. 5, 4, 3, 2. 8 to 9 minutes for tonight, Charles. Thank you. 1. I'm John Batchelor, and I'm joined by Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang, and we're off to Malaysia, joined by our colleague Charles Ortel, Sundays with Charles. He is in Malaysia to apprise us of the development that is possible across the Asian landscape, quite apart from all the aggression and predation that we witness in the People's Republic of China. There are hardworking, extremely ambitious young people in all of Southeast Asia, and Malaysia describes the next frontier. I make a mistake whenever I introduce Charles from Indonesia. He's in the smaller state, but much more promising, and he's on a very prosperous island and traveling in the region. Charles, a very good day to you. Before we get into the question of the People's Republic, how is the trade in Malaysia and Indonesia these days? Is it prospering after the disruption of Liberation Day this last year?
It very much is. Business investment is strong. There's a lot of optimism in Penang, where I am in Malaysia, and across Malaysia and in Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries, in part because the size of the public sector is so much smaller than it is in the United States relative to the private sector, Europe relative to the private sector. The private sector is the engine of growth here. And there are very simple approaches to exporting from these places. There are strong incentives to export, and there are increasingly large internal markets. The only downside for trade, frankly, is that the Malaysian currency has appreciated quite a bit, particularly in the last 90 days. It's, or maybe 180 days. When I got here, it was $1 got you about 4.7 ringgit, and now it's 3.95, which is a pretty big move.
Wow, that is a big move. Well, let's get on to our concern of the moment before we get lost in the intricacies of an ambitious state. Charles, you've watched the markets for many years. I'm an amateur at it in comparison. And I did not note for quite some time now when there's an explanation of how the Chinese economy is performing, especially its stock market. There's something called the national team. It always puzzled me. I mean, I was wondering why use sports metaphor. What is the national team, and what does it mean about the People's Republic of China's understanding of private equity?
Well, as I understand it, the national team is basically a collection of people who are trying to push up the value of Chinese assets, equities, and other securities, various ways. Gordon would know much more about this.
All right, we'll turn to Gordon. Gordon, what is the national team? We've never actually talked about it. I've read about it for years, but is it a moving story? Is it people are designated like captains of the national team?
It's a group of state entities that often act in concert at the direction of the Politburo Standing Committee. And the general direction, John, is to smooth out the ups and downs of the Chinese market and to try to create what they call the slow bull, which is essentially an upward market, but not a hot market, because they know that with a hot market, you end up with a very cold one. And that's happened a number of times in the last 10 years. So what the national team is, and it will be, for instance, you got state banks as part of it, national pension fund, you name it. But they all do act in concert when the government wants them to.
Gordon, I don't think the Chinese got the full understanding of capitalism. Did they? Did they have the full book?
Well, no, I mean, and they've never really had a capitalist system. I mean, at times the system has been freer than it is now, but it's always been, as they say, a socialist system. They don't call it capitalism with Chinese characteristics, which a lot of optimistic Westerners call it. They call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. And they're serious despite what Westerners think. So they always believe that the state should have the controlling hand. And the private sector is there just to enhance the state sector, to give it money, to give it technology. It's just a very different system. And that's why you have the national team. And by the way, John, when you have the national team buying shares, it's actually a renationalization of the private sector because they're owning more and more of private companies.
You have a question for Charles, Gordon.
Charles, is there anything similar to that in Malaysia?
I don't think so to the same extent. Malaysia is a lot more diverse country. You have, of course, local Malays, then you have the Chinese, Malaysian of Chinese origins, you have a big Indian community, you have a big Western community, you have a long-standing history of investment in Malaysia that goes back before World War I. In that period, before World War I, actually the Germans were very big investors in Malaysia, and of course, going way back, the Dutch. So I don't think there's the same sort of certainly not a communist or Politburo approach here in Malaysia. That said, there have been some very strong leaders of the country who were farsighted, who prior to 1970 had a vision going forward, much like the vision in Ireland, that Malaysia should leapfrog ahead, not just be resource extracting, mining, energy, but leap ahead into then the new world of high tech and other things. And they did that successfully. It's quite impressive when you travel around this country to see the state of infrastructure and the diverse nature of the industrial and service operations. It's quite something.
Charles, the Liberation Day of April of 25, what are the effects or results now in Malaysia and Indonesia? Have the bilateral relationships been sealed, or is it still in abeyance?
I don't know the latest and greatest as to the fine detail of these trade agreements. I think they often take they are announced with great fanfare, but wrapping it up with all the appendices and schedules to these agreements can take time. I believe, though, that headline agreements were reached with Malaysia and Indonesia months ago.
And the atmosphere then is positive, that everyone's resolved, or are they waiting? I give you an example of other states where they don't know whether the administration is going to change its mind at any moment. Is that feeling also in Malaysia and Indonesia?
I don't think so. I mean, in Indonesia, to contrast the two, Indonesia, of course, geographically is much, much bigger, and the population is I guess, close to 10 times the size of Malaysia. So you're talking about a very different GDP per capita, wealth distribution than you have in Malaysia. But what I see, and I've now traveled quite a bit across Indonesia, everywhere I go, people are basically leapfrogging ahead to embrace the opportunities that are out there. And you see very sensible infrastructure projects. I mean, you're driving on roads, through airports, et cetera. Malaysia, I think, is further along than Indonesia, both in GDP per capita and in wealth distribution and absolute amount of wealth. But I don't think they're sitting around waiting to see what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., and certainly not waiting to see what's happening as Europe implodes. There's so many opportunities here and so many different entrepreneurs trying to take advantage of them. I mean, literally every day I travel around either country, I see some new positive development. In contrast, the news out of Europe, the news out of New York is beyond depressing and distressing.
Charles Ortel with a thrillingly positive report from part of the little blue bulb hanging in the blackness known as planet Earth. Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang. I'm John Batchelor. There you go, Charles. You made positive soup. Positive carrot soup. Well done.
Something must be wrong. I'm Mr. Gloom and Doom.
I know. I can't imagine what I did to trick you into that positive statement. I've got to remember that. I've got to remember it in the future. Charles, are you well?
I'm very, actually, I just went into the doctor for the first time since 1978, and they were amazed at what good health I'm in.
Wonderful. I described yesterday Mr. Erdogan of Turkey getting a whiff of mortality. I believe we're all of that age. So being healthy is a gift.
Well, I hope we all are, and I wish all of you a happy Chinese New Year, which is imminent.
Thank you. It's a thrill to talk to you again in Malaysia, especially because the system worked. Well, it worked very well. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Gordon and John, and bye.
All right, now we come to
The other Charles.
our colleague and watchtower on Ottawa, which used to be a story that people would flip past on A2 of the Times, but now what's Canada up to today? I learned that there's a bridge in dispute suddenly. Charles Burton of Synopsis joins us, the author of The Beaver and the Dragon. Right now, it's the beaver versus the beaver, as far as I can figure out. Charles, a very good day to you. Help me about the bridge. I just stumbled upon it last night. There's a bridge. It looks beautiful, but is it in contention? Is it incomplete? What is the bridge story?
Well, the major transportation route between Canada and the United States goes from Windsor, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan. And there is a bridge that's been used for many decades, the Ambassador Bridge, which is owned privately by a family that has been strong supporters of the Republican Party. There was a desirability to build another bridge to allow the flow of goods from the United States to Canada and Canada, United States to be more efficient. You know, the Ambassador Bridge is old and small, and so there has been, I mean, over many decades, a plan afoot to build a bridge called the Gordie Howe Bridge, which, relating to the China question, there was a firm called Acon Construction that was involved in the building of this bridge that was about to be acquired by a Chinese state construction company. That matter was eventually scotched, and the Chinese did not get to be the builders of a critical infrastructure between Canada and the United States. In any event, so Canada wanted to finance the building of this bridge, and the Americans were not interested in putting money into it. So the upshot is that the bridge is jointly owned by the state of Michigan and the Dominion of Canada, and all of the funding for the bridge has come from Canada, although the steel and the labor component has been more or less equally distributed between the U.S. and the Canadian sides. The Ambassador Bridge people don't want this bridge to go through because they feel they have the right to all of the tolls on anything going between Windsor and Detroit. So they lobbied Mr. Lutnick to stop this bridge, and Mr. Trump made a statement claiming incorrectly that the bridge was made exclusively with Canadian labor and exclusively with Canadian steel. Subsequently, he had a conversation with the Canadian Prime Minister about this, and it seems that this misunderstanding has been addressed, and so far it looks like the bridge will go through, although the White House spokesman repeated the information, which is evidently false, that the bridge was not using U.S. construction and U.S. labor. Mr. Trump wants Canada to resolve the issues in the Canada-U.S. relationship, including Canada's subsidies of the dairy sector and other matters, before he would allow the bridge to be used. But I think it looks as if this bridge will go through, but you know, you never can tell in politics what the upshot will be and what sort of concessions may be extracted. And I think all of this kind of thing is caught up in the upcoming negotiations over the North American Free Trade Agreement, called the USMCA in the States and CUSMA in Canada.
Wonderful briefing. Good, fine. We'll include that second this morning. I just want to begin with the extremely strange story of the mass killings in a remote town somewhere out west from you, I believe. We have very little of the investigation is underway, but there's a reporting here at least 7 dead in a mass shooting in British Columbia, which is very shocking given Canada's not a mass shooting state, even though there are weapons everywhere. I'll begin with that news, and then we'll go to the bridge. Gordon, you know, you can never get ahead of this. Something called Gordie Howe shows up as a problem for the White House. It's amazing. Yeah. They keep writing plots.
Yep, I know. I was shocked when I heard that.
Yeah, I could accuse you of making all that up, Charles, if not that it wasn't reproduced right here on my Google page. So we'll go to that.
Well, Mr. Howe played for the Detroit Red Wings, but he was a Canadian. So, you know, one sees some meaning to calling it such a name. I don't, but you're right. It is an unusual characterization of a hockey player from long ago. But there we are. He played in, I think, he played in 4 decades. You know, he did make a symbolic return in his 50s. So he and his sons were both well-known Canadian hockey players.
Well, the amazing thing about Gordie Howe and his generation is I think they played without helmets for decades.
Oh, yes. He didn't agree with the helmet idea at all.
Charles, that makes no sense. That puck kills people. Good heavens. And, I guess, okay, fine. They did it. Wow. Okay.
And when I played hockey as a child, helmets were regarded as something for wimps.
Right.
I mean, the idea of being a hockey player is you should be missing teeth and taking blows without stopping play.
I see, sort of like the saber scars of Prussia. Is that it? Okay.
And not to speak of, which is somewhat reduced, but the prevalence of fighting on the ice, where you'd be bashed in the head by people in hockey mitts.
We'll begin. This is 2 segments. We'll begin with the mass shooting, just to record that it's under investigation. The perpetrator is believed deceased along with the victims. There were dozens rescued by first responders. And the prime minister has canceled, as of last reporting, canceled his trip to the Munich Security Conference in order to attend to the mass shooting in British Columbia. And then we'll go to the Gordie Howe Bridge. And Gordon, I propose for the second segment, we speak in general of the Chinese economy as regards to trade with Canada and trade with the U.S., okay?
Sure.
Especially Canada, because of the punitive nature, the way China has used tariffs these last years against Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. 5. This will be 19 minutes for tonight. Thank you. 5. Thank you, Charles. 4, 3. Remember, we're here to sell books, Charles, okay?
Wonderful.
I will ask you what the book contains when it comes to Chinese-Canada relationships. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. Gordon Chang, at Gordon G. Chang, is my colleague and co-host, and we're very pleased to turn to Canadian matters. Our guide, Charles Burton, who is in Ottawa, and he's a member of a think tank called Synopsis. Most importantly, he's the author of a new book that is most helpful to Canadians and Chinese interested in cross-ocean trade. It is entitled The Beaver and the Dragon. It's about the relationship that is at odds right now, but can be healed and can go forward, maybe. However, we begin with news from Canada that is highly unusual, of a mass shooting in British Columbia. The investigation is underway. There are no conclusions. The early reports say that the Prime Minister, Mr. Mark Carney, clears his calendar, will not travel, at least today, to the Munich Security Conference this weekend, and in fact will stand by and perhaps go to British Columbia with the grieving. It's a small community, and there are, as of now, 7 deceased, many wounded. It's not clear at all what the facts are, so I just mentioned that this is highly unusual for Canada. I mean, as in, I don't remember one like this. We turn, however, to what we can speak of, which is Canadian-American relations. And over these last hours, I've become aware of something called the Gordie Howe Bridge. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what it meant, but I saw that the White House was gesticulating loudly. It was something to do with the bridge and whether it would or would not open. Charles, a very good day to you. The tragedy in British Columbia is a pall on the Canadian news right now, but we do not have complete facts, so I await that. Instead, I go to, well, the Gordie Howe Bridge. What is it? Why does it have the name of a great hockey player? And what is the upset that Washington is pointing fingers and blaming and making remarks that suggest the bridge won't be open? What's happened? Good day to you, Charles.
Good day. I think the tragedy in BC is certainly something that Canadians take very hard. And you're right. I mean, Canada has reported extensively on similar incidents in the United States. They haven't been happening in Canada, and it's taken as a justification for Canada's very stringent gun laws. But and also the allegation that illegal guns in Canada are imported from the United States. I'm not sure that is objectively verifiable, but that is the mythology. So this incident has hit Canada hard, and we don't know how the shooter obtained the weapon, or if it was, manufactured in Canada using printer technology or what. I think with regard to the Gordie Howe Bridge, well, I mean, Gordie Howe is a highly regarded figure in Canada, and he did play for the Detroit Red Wings, and the bridge does extend from Windsor, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan, which is the major channel for the transfer of U.S. products into Canada, Canada's imports and Canada's exports into the United States. So it's a very major transportation channel. There is a bridge, the Ambassador Bridge, which is privately owned by a family in the United States who have been actively lobbying that there should be no Gordie Howe Bridge built to expand the capacity of moving trucks back and forth between Canada and the United States on the basis that they have the right to all the tolls that should be accruing from trucks going from US to Canada or vice versa. So Canada identified the need for a bridge, attempted to obtain joint funding from U.S. elements to build a bridge. Canada was not able to get U.S. buy-in into the cost, and so the 6.4 billion Canadian dollars that have been invested in this bridge has come exclusively from the Canadian side. But the steel and the labor has been from both sides, and the bridge will be jointly owned by Canada and Michigan. The idea being that that Canada would recoup the $6.4 billion from the tolls. So evidently, the owners of the Ambassador Bridge engaged with Mr. Lutnick, who transferred the information to Mr. Trump, and Mr. Trump suggested that the bridge was using Canadian steel exclusively, and it would be entirely owned by Canada, and that the United States would not put up with this and would demand equal ownership of the bridge, and that Mr. Trump would only allow the bridge to be used to transport goods from the United States to Canada and vice versa if Canada resolved an assortment of issues in the relationship, including removal of Canadian government subsidies on the dairy sector and the restrictions on import of U.S. milk and cheese into Canada, and a wide range of other issues that he would like to see resolved. There was a conversation between Mr. Trump and Prime Minister Carney of Canada subsequently, and the impression that Mr. Carney has given is that the matter has been resolved to Mr. Trump's satisfaction, when he appreciated that, in fact, U.S. labor and U.S. steel have been used in the bridge, and that the entire cost of the bridge is being paid for by Canada. So who knows where it stands? I mean, product will still be able to move across the Ambassador Bridge, so there's no immediate change in the status quo. But it is part of the ongoing tensions between Canada and the United States, which are leading the Canadian government to consider that Canada should be much more independent in defense, and should diversify our trade away from the very high dependence on the integrated North American market that, over the past 40 years has been the direction that trade has been moving. When Canada and the United States started to negotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, there was a great deal of resistance in Canada to this initiative. And I think perhaps some of the people who opposed it at the time are now suggesting that they should have been paid more attention to then, and we wouldn't be in the conundrum we're in today.
Gordon, you have a comment and question for Charles.
Charles, the free trade agreement among Mexico, Canada, and the United States is up for renegotiation, and that's probably going to take place sometime this year. How is that going?
I think the Mexicans have been much more active in this regard than Canada. And there's also been the suggestion out of Washington that we wouldn't have a relationship between three nations, but that the United States would negotiate separately with Canada and separately with Mexico, which would mean that Canada and Mexico would have to come up with another agreement. And of course, the relationship between Canada and Mexico in trade is relatively modest, but I think the U.S. would get more leverage if they were negotiating bilaterally as opposed to trilaterally with, both nations on the north and south borders. So we'll see how it goes. But it seems that the Canadian government's emphasis is on diversifying away from the United States. Mr. Carney will be making visits to India and several other countries with a view to establishing alternative trade agreements. And of course, he's putting a great deal of stock in his recent visit to China that this would lead to great increase in Canada's access to the Chinese market. I'm skeptical of this idea that China would in fact be willing to allow Canadian commodities and services to trade freely in China. It just doesn't seem to be likely. And after all, Canada's external commodity trade to China only amounts to about 4% of what we send abroad, as opposed to over 70% to the United States of America. So clearly, the United States is the country that we should be focusing on, and not on a country like China, where promises are made that are not fulfilled at the cost of Canada allowing Chinese malign activities in Canada in terms of influence operations, espionage, and so on. So it seems the government, my view is the government's on the wrong track. I must say that at the time of the free trade, I wasn't keen on it, because my assumption was that if it was an integrated economy, and the decisions about the Canadian economy would be in effect made in Washington, that Canada would then want representation in the US Congress, and this would lead to political unification. That was me as a young man speaking out against it. Subsequently, of course, the economic benefits to the unified market to both countries have been substantial. So not sure if I was right or wrong. We'll see.
Charles Burton, he is in Ottawa, a member of the think tank Synopsis, most importantly, the author of The Beaver and the Dragon. And Charles does my work for me in making transition. We're going to speak to Mr. Carney's visit to Beijing and his embassy to join the middle powers, his term, in order to provide trade, reliable trade between the middle powers, and while dealing with the superpowers. That would be the People's Republic of China in ambition and the United States of America in fact. Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my colleagues Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang and Charles Burton, the author of The Beaver and the Dragon. And we go immediately to the opinion of Mr. Carney's visit to Beijing, following a visit by Mr. Albanese of Australia to Beijing, coterminous or nearly so with the most recent visit of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, to Beijing. 3 members of the so-called Five Eyes, all English-speaking, all looking for trade, or at least enhanced trade or secure trade, with the People's Republic of China. I want to focus on Canada, because Mr. Carney is a new voice, and that new voice has opinions that did very well when he made remarks at Davos recently about middle powers. Charles, the question is this. There's a lot of promising going on, but what I've learned about Chinese People's Republic of China promises is that you need to renegotiate tomorrow morning anything you signed last night. Is that changing when it comes to Mr. Carney and Beijing? Did he come home with confidence that whatever promises were made were going to be acted upon? Thank you.
He certainly gave that impression, although he did mention sort of voce that the agreement, say, on the removal of the very heavy Chinese tariffs on canola and replacement with more modest tariffs, would only last till the end of the year. In other words, 9 months, starting in March, ending in December. And then an assortment of agreements to negotiate MOUs, agreements to talk about agreements, were set up in a variety of areas, particularly energy, plus an agreement which has mysteriously not been publicized between the Chinese police and the Canadian police. So we have a situation where China is having ongoing negotiations, and I think the tacit condition is that if Canada does anything that would upset the Chinese, expel agents of espionage, crack down on China's influence operations, further inhibit China's access to high-tech, dual-use military technologies, that this would then queer the negotiations on these MOUs that are supposed to lead Canada to diversifying its economic dependence away from the integrated North American market towards other partners. And it is really based on a myth, because the idea that China would genuinely allow free and fair trade between Canada on a state-to-state basis without conditions is historically has never happened. It's always been a promise of such a thing. So it's been good for Mr. Carney politically, because he's seen as having failed to get any movement with Mr. Trump. And he's perceived as having made a great triumph in a pragmatic reorientation of relations with China. The relationship between Canada and China is now characterized as a strategic partnership, and the implications of that for non-trade areas are, I would say, chilling, to say the least.
Gordon, you have a question.
Charles, part of that agreement that Carney came to in Beijing, it was not only canola, it was electric vehicles. And the agreement was to drop tariffs, Canadian tariffs, from 100% to 6.1% on 49,000 Chinese EVs this year. Now, the Trump administration has said, and I think Trump is correct about this, that they will not allow those Chinese EVs into the United States because they collect data and send it back to China. Would people in Canada actually buy a Chinese EV if they couldn't drive it into America? And what has been the reaction in Ottawa to the Trump administration's view that it will not allow those cars into the U.S.?
Yes, I think that is a very significant aspect. And certainly when the decision, when the Parliament was debating in committee the idea of Chinese EVs, I believe I was the only witness that talked about the security aspect. The others were auto unions and auto manufacturers who felt that the heavily subsidized Chinese EVs would devastate the Canadian auto production. And this was, of course, before Mr. Trump came out with his idea of reshoring all automobile production for sale in the United States by Ford and GM and so on to the U.S. So this issue has been ridiculed in the editorial pages of the Globe and Mail, the view that I have articulated continuously, that the EVs are a greater threat to Canadian security than Huawei 5G. The Premier of Ontario, Mr. Ford, has agreed with this view, and in fact made a statement in which some of his language seemed awfully like an op-ed that I'd written in the Globe and Mail. Happy about that. But in general, it doesn't seem to have much purchase in Canada, and Canadians are enthusiastic about the idea of being able to purchase subsidized EVs. And the Canadian government has just announced $84 million to increase the number of charging stations around the country. I think they're putting in another 8,000 or something like that. So it looks as if this is the direction we're going. And I do wonder, with regard to what I was saying before about Chinese leverage over these endless MOU negotiations and the canola, if China will then subsequently say, well, 49,000 is not enough. How about you let us bring in 200,000 or something like that? So there's also been the idea broached by the government that China would start to manufacture EVs in Canada, and that this would allow us to allow those manufacturers to be tariff-free. But practically speaking, the Canadian auto market is small. And so if those EVs were not eligible for export to the US, what would we do with them? China, I think, has plans for EV factories elsewhere. Would we export them to Europe? Where would they go? The whole thing just doesn't seem to be very feasible. But I think in terms of the 49,000 EVs, it's 49,000 too many EVs running in Canada. With regard to going into the United States, of course, we've seen quite a drop in the number of Canadians entering the United States because of the ongoing bad feelings. And as a result, flights are being are being flight schedules are being terminated, and tourist industries in Florida and other parts of the United States are suffering from the lack of Canadians willing to travel to the U.S. It doesn't seem to have affected the number of Americans coming up to Canada very much.
Quickly, Charles, in the agreement between China and Canada, do you have a CFIUS reviewing any sale of a private equity to China? I remember long ago, before Xi Jinping, it was a question of the intellectual property of I believe it was an energy company in Canada that was a controversy. Does that committee exist in Parliament, and will it be enforced?
Well, I think certainly there is a national security review of all of these major purchases by the Chinese state, and we've turned down a couple. I mean, the purchase of Canada's largest privately owned construction company, Aecon, which, as I mentioned, was supposed to be in the construction of the Gordie Howe Bridge. And we also turned down China's acquisition of an energy company in the oil sands, Nexen. But I think with the current strategic partnership rhetoric, if China was to propose purchasing some company, which I would imagine would have some leverage over critical infrastructure, that the Canadian government would agree to it.
Right.
It seems that in the interests of promoting Canadian prosperity, or the myth of possibly promoting Canadian prosperity, concerns about security and sovereignty have been cast aside.
Charles Burton, the book is The Beaver and the Dragon, about Canadian-Chinese relations up to yesterday. Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang. I'm John Batchelor. Bravo, Charles. Bravo.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you. Thank you
I'm
for
heading out for 2 hours of skiing now.
Good for you. Are the slopes warmer than they have been for several days?
Yes, it's about -9 on the Celsius scale. So that's ideal weather for skiing. The snow is good, and it's not too cold on the face.
Well, you're not going to fall down and hurt yourself and not be available for 3 months, are you?
My wife thinks that's a possibility. I feel what a way to go.
All right, fine.
I mean, Sonny Bono's death was something that was a good way.
Mortality, Charles, mortality.
I hope to keep skiing for a good long time.
It worked perfectly again this morning. Gordon, the technology all worked. It's amazing.
That's good.
Yeah, very good. Thank you both very much.
Okay.
I've got a couple of minutes, just 2 minutes. Let's take advantage of them. Right now, the bridge matter, is it settled? Because it sounds like that famous word pretext. Is it settled, or are they going to use it again?
I don't think it's settled, because Carolyn Levitt repeated Mr. Trump's line on it in her press briefing. So Mr. Carney thinks it's settled. I'm not so sure.
Right. They do look for pretexts to open up conversations that don't seem to end. Odd. Gordon, do you measure that the USMCA is going to go well after all this noise, or is there trouble ahead?
I'm sure there's going to be trouble ahead. And I tweeted last night that Trump's got to settle this. This thing about the bridge really is just wrong to raise. If you want to raise a controversy over the bridge, you do it when it's being negotiated, not after it's being built. And I guess it's virtually finished, Charles, right? It's just about to open.
Finished. And in earlier, when the bridge was ongoing, Mr. Trump supported it. He may have forgotten that. I mean, the part about Canada paying the full shot, something that I think he approved of at the time.
Anybody who plays ice hockey without a helmet needs a bridge. Good heavens. As many bridges as he wants. Charles Burton, Gordon Chang, Gordie Howe, and thank you all very much. I'm going to find the button and press it. Now for the music. And thank you,